you find a trail of people moving, like a 30 on foot, everybody holding a panga.
Land wrangling, domestic violence,
food insecurity,
children who are malnourished,
theft,
pure child labor,
high dropouts,
crime,
poverty.
They weed, they cut, they load lorries, and sometimes you see them going up the sugar factories on lorries.
The persistent poverty in the Uganda sugarcane growing communities continues to raise questions as to whether sugarcane cultivation is helping to end household poverty at the grassroots. Civil society human rights activists in Uganda, under their umbrella bodies, the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability and network of public interest lawyers, are tasking Parliament to address the plight of sugarcane outgrowers, to address rural poverty and food security in the sugarcane growing communities. The activists observed that investors' contracts in the sugarcane industry have negatively impacted on the workers' rights, with increased cases of child labor and high levels of school dropouts. This was during the inaugural seminar of members of parliament from sugarcane large-scale growing areas in Uganda on the fulfillment of labor and farmers' rights and environmental sustainability.
My name is Joseph Haji. I coordinate the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability. It's a civil society consortium that brings together currently 23 non-government organizations that work together to enhance the regulation of corporate activities in the country, to ensure that human rights are not sacrificed at the altar of profit for these companies. Today, I shared with the members of parliament from the Busoga region, particularly in the sugar growing districts and also in Buikwe, about the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability's documentary titled Planting Poverty and Conflict, the Bitter Taste of Sugar. In that documentary, we used Luuka district as our case study to flag the human rights concerns that result from the sugar sector in our country. Key to highlight is the fact that there is a lot of child labor in the sugarcane growing sector. Children in the region are not going to school before the lockdown, and now that they are actually in a lockdown and not going to school, the prevalence of child labor is so high. Children are holding pangas and harvesting sugarcane, which is not appropriate for their age. The other key issue was the fact that the children also do not have an access to education. The district education officer kept emphasizing that children then, before COVID-19, would wear school uniforms, but inside the school uniforms, they would have the casual clothes with their pangas tucked in. So upon leaving home, they would indicate to their parents that they are going to school, and along the way, take off the uniform, tie it up in a polythene bag, and go onto people's plantations to harvest sugarcane. This is extremely dangerous, because when children don't have an education, then the insecurity in the region is going to increase. These children are only getting the skill of cutting sugarcane. In the next 20 years, when probably sugarcane is not a going concern anymore, those children will only have a skill of cutting and using the panga, and probably the human beings in the region will become the sugarcane. We risk being killed by children that will have become adults without an education and with a lot of poverty, without any employable skills. The other key thing was the issue of food insecurity, and this comes from the fact that the men who own land in the region lease out the entire chunk of land to sugarcane outgrowers. What that means is that then their wives no longer have arable land to grow food for the home. They usually have cassava and sweet potatoes and vegetables around, but when you lease out the entire piece of land to the point that you're growing sugarcane up to your house, and you don't have any space to grow food, then the region in Busoga is going to become food insecure, and this is the same trend we are seeing now in the Bunyoro region, with 3 milling companies of sugar setting up in that place. We've recommended to members of parliament from the Busoga region and in Buikwe to make sure that they amend the Sugar Act such that they ensure that they regulate issues of land available for sugarcane growing, to ensure that issues of negotiations between the outgrowers and the owners of the land are regulated, because key of the things is the cheating that results from that process, and then to ensure that there is proper regulation at the local government level, districts are encouraged to enact ordinances that prohibit child labor, such that it's not fashionable for any person in the region to employ children. Then the issue of migrant workers, the woman MP of Terego noted that all the migrant workers in the sugar plants come from West Nile. It's something that needs to be looked into. Casualization of labor is a very big challenge. People are working on these farms, on these shambas of sugarcane without contracts, without social protection, and nobody is bothered. And to the sugar milling companies, especially Kakira Sugar Corporation of Uganda, Lugazi Limited, and all the others that have been established in the various districts of Busoga, we ask you to pay attention to the human rights concerns in your supply chains. Do not allow to receive sugarcane from a farmer that has been employing children to grow that sugarcane. You're perpetuating the abuse of human rights if you give that farmer market and enable them to continue hiring children on their shambas as opposed to sending the children to school. Currently, the Sugar Act reflects the interests of the milling companies and partially the outgrowers. Most of the community concerns were not reflected, and this was seen in the discussions before the enactment of the Sugar Act, when the old milling companies were able to seek audience of the head of state to see to it that their interests are reflected in the law. But what is most pertinent is what affects the community. Issues of land fragmentation, issues of access to land available for sugarcane growing, but also for growing food to sustain the livelihoods of the family are what we want to be looked at. We definitely have a robust legal framework when it comes to child labor, but the districts in Busoga region and in Uganda and also Bunyoro, where they are growing sugarcane, should go ahead and enact district ordinances that prohibit the use of children on sugarcane shambas. It is very, very absurd that Ugandan children miss out on education and instead go and cut sugarcane from the age of 5.
Sereko Arthur is my name, and I coordinate the network of public interest lawyers, an initiative of the School of Law, Makerere University. And as a network, our duty is to promote social justice and human rights through public interest lawyering. We recognize the role of Parliament in promoting, protecting and fulfilling the rights of Ugandans. Much as they've given us the laws, Parliament has a duty to follow up on the execution of these laws. And where there are gaps, then these gaps need to be filled. From the engagement, the question of labor issues, labor rights in the context of the sugar cane or sugar industry have been top on our agenda. We know the exploitation of labor that happens in that industry. We know the casualization of labor that happens in that industry. And then the failure of the duty bearer, we talk of government, the executive, to hold the perpetrators accountable. And Parliament, being one of the arms of government, is enjoined to monitor the implementation of these laws, the policies and the practice. Yes, the general discussion or narrative has been that we have good laws and the laws have sufficiently taken care of everything. But then the question is, why is there a disparity between the laws and practice? Do we need to change the law to match the practice, or do we need the practice do we need to change the practice to match the laws? So there are those gaps that definitely require parliamentary intervention. And Parliament's duty is to, first of all, bring to book or to the fore those abuses, those violations. We are talking of corporations that are more powerful than the members of Parliament. We are talking of corporations that are even more powerful than the local governments that are meant to be monitoring them. And so the only recourse that we have, if we are to ensure a respect of these rights, is running to the entire House of Parliament. So through its different structures, we talk of the Human Rights Committee, we are now talking of a sugar forum within Parliament. These different structures can be open doors where we can bring corporations and individual perpetrators to account in as far as violations and abuses are concerned in the sugar industry.
My name is Lydia Buite. I work with Platform for Labour Action as a manager programs. Today we had a convening with members of parliament, especially those members of parliament coming from the sugarcane growing areas in the country. Majority of them are coming from the Busoga sub-region, but of course also the other regions that actually also supply labor within the sugar industry. We are glad that as a country we have the national policy, the national sugar policy of 2010, but also which has now been backed with the Sugar Act of 2020. Of course, when you read into the law overall legislates on other aspects of production, which is capital and land, and of course trying to bridge the gap between the millers and also the farmers and the outgrowers. But of course the other aspects or other activities that happen on the fields or in the factories, such as the labor force itself, were not legislated upon. Perhaps because already as a country we say we have the labor and employment legal framework, and then of course it's supposed to be acting in those particular areas. But of course it's very important to remind the actors in the sector or in the industry about labor as a factor of production and how labor is being treated within the industry. When we look overall within the industry, we realize there's casualization of labor is really very high, and especially when you look at the factories themselves or people whom we call the millers, and also on the farms, there's a lot of casualization of labor, and by so doing, a number of labor rights are actually swept under the carpet, because most of these workers are categorized as casual laborers. They will not have access to maternity leave, they don't have rights like annual leave, they don't have rights like social protection, then they will not be saving. And yet as a country we know that once the biggest majority or the majority of the labor force, if does not take into consideration social protection and at least social security, it means that in the long run, as the labor force age, again it will be a very high expenditure on the country itself in terms of on the social services. So we are just here trying to brainstorm and perhaps doing consensus that what is it that the industry needs to think about in terms of the labor. We also realize that there is also a lot of child labor within the industry itself, and this has actually been worsened by the outbreak of COVID-19, which of course led to the closure of the learning institutions for some time now. And we have seen many children as young as 5 getting onto their feet, being taken as either family labor, but also others being hired in their independent capacity as workers or as laborers to go and cut sugar cane, to load it, to offload it, to do so many things. But like I will not, like one of the top leaders in one of the districts from Kalilo district noted and said that we need to be careful as a country. And of course for him at that time he was saying that they need to be careful as a district, but for me I would say we need to be careful as a country, that when that sugar canes are over in terms of cutting, these young people who have learned how to use the machetes that they are carrying, they will end up cutting us ourselves. So we are here to see that we don't become the sugar cane in a long run, but we protect these young people as well as ensuring that there is proper development and productivity within the industry itself.
The legislators observed that farmers and their indigenous communities suffer a lot of injustice, as they hardly play any role in decision-making regarding the management and sustainable use of the resources. They pledged commitment to make public the gaps in the law and to engage the executive to account and resolve the challenges.
I'm Dr. Baiga Michael Urume, Member of Parliament from Bikwe South constituency and also interim chairman for the Forum on Sugar Industry. As members of Parliament representing constituencies with the sugarcane growing and with the sugar industry, we are very proud to have sugar industries within the localities where we come from, because it is an envisioned economic activity that would support agricultural production and engagement of very many people who can make a living out of agriculture through a marketable product such as growing of sugarcane and also industrialization of production of sugar itself. We have also examined with our partners here at NECPIL the various problems, the bitter taste of sugar, whereby we have examined its production, where children are being engaged and exploited. The production of sugarcane, which takes over even the arable land that should have been able to produce food for consumption, being taken up by mere production of sugarcane. We have also seen the price of sugarcane being low, and also the cost of labor causing exploitation, where rights, our children, rights of workers, rights of women are exploited. They are played down. They are not even talked about. They are violated without recourse for legal representation. We have seen that sugar production is becoming counterproductive because it is not paying dividends to the producers. We have also seen that despite the fact that the prices of sugar have continued to be up, there is a claim that we have overproduction of sugar in our country and we consume less than what we produce, and therefore there is oversupply. The question is, how do we talk about oversupply of sugar, yet the sugar prices remain high? Therefore, there is a knot that needs to be opened so that we can know the bottleneck and how to break the bottleneck to ensure that if at all we produce more, then the prices of sugar go down to enable everybody to access it. We should be able to address how the sugar industries can be enhanced in order to crush all, consume all that has been produced, to enable the forward and backward linkages be helping each other than constipating a system of production and therefore denying people of their pay for their labor and therefore for their production. If at all the people are not paid, then they cannot have the energy to produce. The products continue to rot in their gardens. Some of them set them to fire, which means that there is a lot of labor wastage in terms of land resources. We should have produced more, but end up burning the whole farm of sugarcane just because people are not paid in time or they are paid less than what they should have expected. So our engagement, the first of the kind, is going to help us to continue to engage on even employment terms and conditions, social protection, social security for those who are employed.
My name is John David Livingstone. I am the Member of Parliament representing Butembe constituency in Jinja, which is the sugarcane growing capital of the nation. We all know about Kakira Sugar Works. Today we are here at the Ndere Cultural Center for an engagement with the network of public interest litigation and members of parliament from sugarcane growing areas to consider the issue of balancing business with human rights, that we shouldn't do business at the cost of human rights. We have looked at studies and found that in the course of sugar production, in the course of sugarcane growing, there are a lot of human rights concerns that must be addressed. We have seen that labor rights are violated, where workers do not receive the care and dignity that should be accorded to them as humans and as workers, whether skilled or unskilled. We have seen that there are issues of child labor. Children are employed on sugarcane plantations. They are employed on loading of sugarcane on trucks, doing work that even adults would travail in doing. We have seen the unbalanced platform of negotiation between the corporations and the farmer, where the huge companies have a voice way greater than that. The farmers do not have a negotiating platform, and therefore they are taken advantage of. So as members of parliament, we are thinking that it is necessary for us to sit together, engage, investigate how we can address these issues so that development does not come at the cost of human rights. We must balance opportunities with responsibility. While we have opportunities, we must address the challenges that come with that. And we know that this is not an issue that can be resolved in one conversation. So together with NetPIL, Network of Public Interest Litigation, together with Action Aid, together with the Sugar Forum of the 11th Parliament, members have resolved to continue this conversation, come up with sustainable, durable, and really effective strategies in addressing human rights issues in as far as the sugar industry is concerned. So we look forward to engaging more and transforming the sugar industry, transforming the lives of sugarcane farmers and their families and the surrounding communities, bringing corporations to account for corporate social responsibility so that we do business equitably. We also looked at the issue of environmental protection, the protection of the environment. We have seen that usually with sugarcane growing comes with environmental degradation. That when a sugarcane farmer identifies a piece of land, the first thing in their mind is to cut down all the trees, to cut down all the forests, and excavate and do ground leveling in order to plant sugarcane. Now you find that what is cut down vis-a-vis the sugarcane plant in as far as the environment and green vegetation is concerned is not commensurate. So we're thinking that as we do the business of sugarcane growing and sugar production, the environment needs to be put into consideration and there has to be measures to mitigate environmental degradation.
The lawyers' engagement with the lawmakers is aimed at creating an enabling legal framework on labor and farmers' rights in the sugarcane growing areas.
Audio Jungle.